Welcome, everyone. I'm super excited to have you here this evening to talk about mindful eating is the solution. I'm Dr. Lulu, and I'll be your host for this wonderful webinar today. So, just a little bit about me. I'm Dr. Lulu Shimmick. I'm a naturopathic physician and expert in genetic health. I work with patients experiencing chronic disease, hormonal imbalance, endocrine disorders, gastrointestinal dysfunctions, depression, anxiety, and fatigue. I believe that once we dive deep down into the root of the problem of the distortion, and ignite our body's innate ability to heal, we see unimaginable changes in our well being. So, my passion really lies in helping people discover their zest and joy for life that has been lost along the way of illness or chronic disease. And before I started my clinic, Dr. Lulu's Naturopathic Clinic, I journeyed through many careers. I'm like a true Renaissance woman. I studied interior design at the University of Georgia, and I have a doctorate from the prestigious Bastyr University in Seattle. I'm also an herbal formulator, international speaker, and author, spreading the message of health and educating about prevention and well-being, which is truly my passion and purpose. You can check out my new book, Detox, Nourish, Activate, Plant and Vibrational Medicine for Energy, Mood, and Love. And right now it's for pre-sale on Amazon. And don't forget to check out my podcast, The Genetic Genius. It's dedicated to genomics and planetary alternative health. My new book will focus on using botanical medicine and other natural modalities to heal the whole body by optimizing vitality, increasing well being, and enhancing cellular performance. I facilitate ceremonies to activate plant and mineral medicine, connecting points around the world to elevate planetary consciousness and community. As the botanical medicine director at the Veterans Healing Farm, I'm also able to share my expertise with the veteran community about using plants to help heal and elevate their lives. I'm invigorated by traveling and seeing the world with my husband, visiting botanical gardens, and anything else related to delicious food. So, today we're going to be talking about the importance of mindful eating. And if you're interested in learning more, you can check out my upcoming program, the Genetic Detox Program. This might be for you. So, what does it mean to eat mindfully? That's our main focus as we're going to be walking through the next hour today. So, mindful eating is a type of awareness, right? You have during this awareness during the moment of eating food, whether that's you're distracted or in tune with your body. Similar to other forms of mindfulness, you enter a place of non judgment. And instead, you appreciate the current moment from what you're eating and whether you're enjoying it to the details like the taste and the temperature of your food. And isn't that a beautiful picture of the papaya there? I love papaya. It's so great for the digestive system, full of enzymes. So, is mindful eating the same as mindfulness? Well, mindful eating is a type of mindfulness that uses the same principles as mindfulness. The main difference is that a specific task you perform where you are mindful, as opposed to more general mindfulness throughout the day, if that makes sense. So, but as a definition, yes, mindful eating is using mindfulness tools and techniques, which we're going to be talking about today. So why mindful eating is so beneficial? So you're going to benefit in many different ways by becoming more mindful of when you're eating and while you're eating. So you heal your relationship with food, you learn to eat slower, you have a better understanding of hunger and fullness, and then you know what food satisfies you and makes you feel good, makes you feel happy and joyful, and it helps your digestive system to process and assimilate. So, what are some of the benefits of mindful eating, right? So, it sounds like a great thing that we can do to have this mindfulness so that when we're eating, but what are some of the benefits? Why is it a great thing to start adding into your daily routine? So, now that you know what mindful eating is and how it works, the next common question is really why, right? Why do we want to do this? And you can see this person in the photo here. They have a cup of tea and they're doing some yoga and reading a book. That might be a mindfulness technique, but we're talking about, really embracing the aspect with food. And there are many benefits to mindful eating, but here are some of the most important ones that we're going to talk about today. So, one, we want to change our relationship with food, really start to have that connection so that we're eating things that are really benefiting us in the most important way, putting a stop to emotional eating. So instead of having the emotions rule our course of eating, we're going to allow that connection and mindfulness and thoughtfulness about food. Become familiar with your fullness cues. So listening to your body and knowing when you're full instead of continuing to eat and move forward. And improving your digestion. I'm going to go back to here for a second. Oops. Okay. So changing your relationship with food. I want to talk about these a little bit more in detail. So the first benefit you may notice when you start mindful eating is that you begin to improve your relationship with food, right? And so having a bad relationship with food often comes from a history of dieting or restricting your food, whether it's meant if you're like a yo-yo dieter in the past or just constantly feeling guilty about the types of food that you ate. That's really common, and even food eating disorders. So, mindful eating shifts that focus from the quality of your food or how much you are supposed to eat, and instead allows you to understand all food is food. All can be allowed and there's no judgment. So that's really the key about changing that relationship, is shifting that place of eating to no judgment. So, putting a stop to emotional eating. So, if you're someone that struggles with emotional eating, this can be a wonderful benefit for you, right? So, mindful eating is often used by people who are dealing with overeating while being stressed or bored or having any emotion other than actual hunger, right? So, what is that real message? What are we really listening to tell us if we're really hungry? And when you start eating more mindfully, you become more aware of why you choose each meal or each snack, or whether it was from a true place of hunger or not, or a craving, or just because you're bored or sad. So it's really about awareness and checking in to that emotional connection. So becoming familiar with your fullness cues. So through mindful eating, become more aware. We start to pay more attention to how our body feels when we eat. And then we can actually notice when we're starting to feel satisfied. So people often eat so quickly and mindlessly, like right, eating while you're watching TV or eating while driving or eating quickly while you're on the way to school. There's lots of different things that come into that mindfulness connection. And so when we eat so quickly and mindlessly, we eat well past fullness and without realizing it, because we're not listening to those natural cues that our body is giving us. So when we eat mindfully, we're eating slower and paying much more attention to how we feel emotionally and physically. And over time, you can start to notice like little signals that our body is just about ready to stop eating, right? Just on that verge. And this is hugely beneficial for a number of reasons. And so, from preventing unnecessary weight gain and helping you to lose weight or to gain weight if you're eating too quickly and your body's just processing stuff under a lot of chronic stress or anxiety, you're not holding on to that nutrition. And overall, you're going to feel better. So, improving our digestion. So, mindfulness helps to improve our digestion since we begin to eat slower and with more intention. So, digestive issues are not always about what we eat, right? So, it's not just about eating a standard American diet, it's about eating habits. So, people who tend to eat really quickly and scruff down food, often while watching their latest, like Netflix marathon or Hulu, are much more likely to have digestive issues than other people who take their time, both in choosing what to eat, where to eat, and knowing when to stop eating. So, how mindfulness helps with emotional eating. So, you can eat slower and you can tell when you're full. That's really key. So, it can actually take up to 20 minutes for your brain to send signals to your body that you are full. So, we're like eating, but we've eaten past that gut and brain connection. So this is why if you rush through meals really quickly, you're bound to eat more than your body needs, and then you feel uncomfortable, bloated, you have GERD, burping, gas, all those symptoms that you've been eating too quickly. So, with mindful eating, you're eating as much slower and you pay attention to your body and thoughts the entire time. You're not going to get caught up in the latest Netflix special to realize you were full 10 like chips ago. So, even if your reason for eating those chips really like was for an emotional reason, you don't finish off the bag without thinking twice about it. So, that's the main difference there. So, with mindfulness, we start to develop coping skills. Emotional eating is closely tied to anxiety, stress, procrastination, and boredom. And mindful eating and mindfulness in general can help us learn some positive coping skills. Because for these emotions, we have to understand when we start to eat out of boredom and when we eat because of hunger, because those are two different emotional aspects. This is one of the reasons why we highly recommend keeping a journal of your mindful eating process. Really key. And that's a great way to start really connecting your emotions to your eating. You can keep track of what you eat, why you ate, and when you stopped eating. And you start to see trends about when you tend to emotionally eat. For some people, it's when they're bored or procrastinating, but for others, it can be when they're lonely or anxious or overly stressed. So over the past year plus with COVID, I've seen a huge change in the way that people have been eating mindfully because they've been in this state of stress and haven't been able to listen to their bodies fully. So, as you start to see the patterns develop in yourself, you learn to work on developing other coping skills that really have nothing to do with eating, right? We're really about it's our emotional body that we're learning to cope with that then in turn shifts to eating. So, you have a better understanding of physical versus emotional hunger. So, one of the best things about mindful eating will do for you is to really help you identify physical hunger and emotional hunger. So, your mind can trick you into thinking you're famished when really you're just looking for something to occupy your time or, like that comfort. But if you have never focused much on the why you're eating, why you want to eat, and what you crave, you might have not even known most of that was just emotional hunger, right? And so when you're focusing on that, we're eating just for craving, we're not really tuning in with that emotional hunger starts to take over and then we just overeat. So, mindful eating to help lose weight. So, sometimes when we're eating that overeating, the weight starts to build up. So, whenever the topic of changing your eating habit comes up, it almost always leads to the discussion of weight loss, right? So, there's nothing wrong with intentional weight loss if that is something that you feel that's important to you and it will improve your life. But mindful eating is it really like a way to lose weight? Well, here are I'm going to tell you some tips and some things to know about the links between them. So, mindful eating is not meant as a weight loss tool, it's not its goal. it can be an end result, but it's not the goal that we're aiming for here. And while many people do discover that the pounds start shedding once they practice mindful eating, this is not our main focus. If all you do is think about eating as little as possible in order to lose weight, mindful eating is not going to be as effective for you. So, I really wanted to get this out of the way before we talk about weight loss, is focusing on losing weight, because only it does it kind of affects the way mindful eating will work for you if that's your main goal in mind. Okay, so you stop overeating. So, one of the more common reasons mindful eating may help you lose weight is that because you tend to eat just until satisfaction without overeating. So, mindless eating is closely tied to overeating, since you eat so fast without thinking, and that you don't even know where you were many bites ago, or where you are now, right? Because of that connection. So overeating is so easy to do, especially if you're used to more mindless eating, right? You like realize, oh wow, I just ate that whole thing. How did that even happen? I wasn't even tuned into the meal or tuned into what I was eating. And this means you have like many other things going on while eating. And instead of putting normal portions on your plate, you bring an entire box or entire bag, or you just a little prep of mindfulness can really help prevent this. So many people find that their emotional eating is then reduced. So if you struggle with emotional eating, mindful eating will help with so much with that. And emotional eating may cause you to eat foods that aren't very nutrient dense, right? Eating the standard American diet food, or eating junk foods and foods that are often higher in quantities of poor nutritional value, because they're overly processed and they don't really help us get full. They're not satisfying, so we want to eat more of them. The commercial, for the Lay's potato chips. You can't just eat one potato chip, because it's feeding dopamine, that neurotransmitter in the brain, and it's sending a message that it's making us feel good, when it's really a false sense of feeling good. So you may begin to enjoy more nutritious foods. So the more that you listen to what your body is really needing and really craving through being mindful, the more you notice how much you feel better when you're eating nutritious, nutrient dense foods. And you start understanding when you crave protein or vegetables, or when you crave something quick and satisfying. So it's really just about tuning in and listening. So, how mindful eating improves your relationship with food. So, let's talk about the mindfulness and the actual relationship. So, you begin to appreciate food for what it is. So, the first way mindful eating helps with your relationship with food is helping you to fully appreciate what it is instead of being afraid of it, right? So, no matter what your history with food is and dieting is, you probably have some fear of foods in the background, right? So these are foods that you get anxious about, or maybe they're like offered at a party, or that you never keep in the house because you feel like you can't control how much you eat. That is that part of that relationship that we're working on and discovering for the digestive aspect and for the emotional aspect. So, with mindful eating, it helps you to make all foods neutral, right? So, you don't have an attachment to either food. So, no food is either good and no food is either bad. All food nourishes us in different ways. So you begin to understand that your day, mood, hunger, cravings, time of the month, and so many other factors go into satisfaction from these different types of food. So all your senses are activated. So you will begin using each and every sense you have during your meals, which helps in so many ways, right? So by using your senses, it's further going to help you see food for what it is. And you understand different flavors, colors, textures, smells, and sounds with your food, which further helps it all to become more allowed in your diet, allowing and receiving that food. And the more you can focus on your senses, the less you focus on biases you have towards certain like unhealthy foods. So you begin experiencing less guilt and shame, which is a huge aspect of food disorders and mindful eating. So, the reason people often had a bad relationship with food is from diet mentality. This can lead to fearing food and experiencing a lot of guilt and shame over your food choices. So, luckily, through mindful eating, you start lessening these emotions and instead just reveling in the experience of eating, right? Really enjoying every mouthful. So there's no reason to feel any type of guilt over foods you eat or how much. Sure, you might overeat a little and feel uncomfortable for a few hours, but mindful eating helps to minimize that as long as you pay attention to your body's signs, right? So we're really connecting in, listening to our body to help that experience have less guilt. So all foods fit and you can enjoy them all, right? So just like in intuitive eating, mindful eating helps you accept all foods and fit them all into your life, not into little boxes, but holistically. There's a place for everything from grilled chicken and salads to pastries and popcorn. There is, when we have the intention to listen to our body with the cravings, there's a whole different sense of the way that we eat. And mindful eating helps us to slowly discover foods that we love, that we didn't think we loved, a new relationship with food, and foods that we might not have been a really big fan of before. So let's talk about the steps to starting mindful eating. So if you're feeling a little overwhelmed by making the switch to becoming a mindful eater, you might not, you're not the only one here. It does take commitment but I'm going to talk you through some different ways that can really help. So one, choose one meal or time of the day to practice. So this is often the first thing that I recommend that people do when they're starting mindful eating. Don't try to be mindful during every meal. It'll just become overwhelming. Then you'll be in a stress state and that won't be good for your digestion. You don't want to be overwhelmed. You want to be relaxed. And it's really hard to change multiple habits all at once. You want to focus on doing one thing easily and then have success from that. So start small, like with a meal or like a snack. And then, maybe when you tend to be alone and not around a bunch of people who might be observing the way that you're trying to eat in a new way. This could be an afternoon snack that you eat on, when you're eating in between things, or your breakfast that you're eating in the morning. Just pick a time, one meal to start off with, and take that time to shut off distractions. So just focus on the experience of eating. So turning off distractions and sitting quietly is really key. So I'm talking about, turning off your phone, turning off the TV, maybe putting on some relaxing music, allowing you to really focus and zen in. So during that one meal or snack a day, removing all those distractions is key. And let this be a time to just enjoy your food, savor it, and really be delighted in the fact that you got to eat something you truly enjoy eating. That's really key. And it might be a hard transition at first. It's like nothing's easy in the beginning when we're trying something new. If you're used to always eating while watching something or listening to a podcast, but you get used to it in time, right? So you're going to have, it takes a little time to build a new habit. So this is also why I recommend you start with just one meal or one snack, then gradually doing it more often and then increasing it over time. So let your mind focus on enjoying the meal. So before and during your meal, start activating and focusing on each sense, right? The smell, the taste, the look of something, the texture. Again, you might want to start with just one sense at a time if that feels overwhelming for you. This focusing on one thing and really absorbing that in. And or during each meal, go through each sense, including sight, sound, smell, touch, and taste. Just let it, take things naturally. And when we use our senses, we ground ourselves and allow ourselves to enjoy the moment and not really think about too much else. And even without those distractions, our minds tend to wander, right? So it's okay if that happens, as long as we keep coming back to that moment and keep coming back to that emotional feeling, coming back to our food, and try to really paying attention to how our body's feeling and what about the food we're really loving. So you can also keep a journal nearby, which I talked about earlier, to help jot down anything that you might notice while you're working on this mindfulness technique. Okay, so let's talk about shifting our mindset with mindful eating. So, how do we start shifting our mindset? So, first of all, your mindset is how you think about things, how you process different emotions, and with what your thought process is. So, everyone kind of has their own mindset. Everyone has their own way that they move about through life. It's often a myriad of different things. So, with mindful eating, you want to develop a certain type of awareness in your mindset, but also a lot of positivity for yourself and acceptance for trying something new. So, three things here. First, slow down and enjoy the moment. So, to shift your mindset about eating and food in general, just slow down and enjoy it, right? This is truly one of the best things that you can do. Just take that moment. I think chewing things in the mouth this first and really savoring things is the key to that, because then it will start all the digestive enzymes in the mouth really working and allows the digestion to really start to come into play. And when we think about food as something to like not enjoy or suffer through or be completely mindless about, that will always be more what we think about, right? We really want to focus on the enjoyment, the slowing down, savoring every bite. And then our mindset starts to change dramatically. So flipping through every negative thought into an accepting one, right? So when those negative thoughts start to come up when we're eating, this is a time to turn it into a positive one. And it's not always possible to turn a negative thought into a positive one, but with mindfulness you can get to that place of acceptance with the food and the emotions that come around the food. So it might be unrealistic to think your mindset and thought process is going to be 100% positive and uplifting all the time, right? But what you can do is to start flipping those overly negative ones and judgmental thoughts, and instead just accept what is. So, this is a big part of mindfulness, as you just accept the current moment and where you are right now when you're eating. So, another big aspect is to take a deep breath before practicing mindfulness and before eating. So, breathing techniques. So, I work a lot with patients with breathing and food because it's engaging that parasympathetic nervous system, that resting and digesting, having that gut brain connection. And breathing techniques are often associated and used with mindfulness because they help to center us and ground us while eating. And this just takes just spending a few minutes before you start eating. So, you don't have to close your eyes and zen out. You could just take a deep breath in, and then start eating. This really helps us to focus on our breathing, and it helps us. It's a good way to start to get into the practice of mindfulness at each meal. And it can help you clear your mind so that stress doesn't come into the eating, into that mind, and you go into the meal with the right mindset. So why should you track how much you eat? So one of the tools you can use when you're starting to work on mindful eating and healing your relationship with food is to track how much you eat and what you eat. So this is not meant to control what you eat, but instead to be used in conjunction with your mindful eating journey. So we're going to talk about these three things here. So first, to track how mindful eating is helping with your food issues. So it's a really excellent reason to start tracking what you're eating while mindful eating, because you can actually see at what point mindful eating is helping you, right? Because you can look back and you can see, oh, I was doing this technique, I was having help here. Oh, I was eating, I was really stressed out, eating really quickly, then my body was experiencing this after. So it's a journal can really help with that. For example, like if you've been writing in your journal every day during your mindful meals about the experience, you may notice that you aren't focusing so much on the quality of the food, but little details you noticed, right? So, or maybe you have added some journal entries where you caught yourself being more mindful, even with distractions, or how much easier it was to getting to focus on your eating instead of other things. So that can be really helpful and show progress about your change in mindset. And to make you aware of your eating habits is the second one. So it's really important because you might have be coming into this with some bad eating habits without realizing it, and which is really common. But they become more apparent when you start practicing mindful eating. Maybe when writing down why you choose a specific food or what your intention for that meal was. You discovered a lot of them are from being bored and not really hungry or not actually hungry, or that you tend to have certain types of foods when you're sad or under a lot of stress. This is very common, those comfort foods. So, everything about your eating habits is important to record in that journal, including what you eat, when you eat throughout the day and during the day, what inspires you to eat, how you feel when you're hungry or feel when you tend to overeat, and so many more details. So, don't go crazy. This is what I tell patients all the time. Don't go get anxious and overwhelmed with journaling. Just make it like a sentence or two in that mindfulness as you're retraining your body. That's why it becomes something fun and joyful for you. You don't want it to become a chore. And then the other thing about tracking is to see your growth with your relationship to food. So mindful eating is like so amazing at helping you to work on your relationship with food, which I talked about earlier. You know, our relationship with food can be toxic sometimes if we're having that come in with a lot of emotions like stress and anxiety, or after a series of restrictive eating or dieting, that we're not able to have a true relationship with quantities of food. So by tracking our food and mindful eating process, you begin to discover a lot about yourself, and similar to your eating habits, so much more about ourselves. We really are allowing ourselves to go really deep. And you might even see when you begin transitioning to having that healthy relationship with food that you have less anxiety about food, less fear about certain food, and you begin to have a joyful relationship with food and a loving relationship. And don't forget, nothing you feel or experience is wrong. If you feel something bad or good, it doesn't matter. It's just an emotion. So it's good. You want to start that journal because it allows us to have those emotions come up and to begin to relate with those emotions or motivations or those new relationships we're establishing with food. So, what to pay attention to when eating mindfully? So, these are some things that can really, when I recommend that you start writing in that journal, in tracking, and start to pay attention to while you're eating. Because as you begin to be more mindful during your meals, you might have a little difficulty with the silence of your mind, like wandering around, right? If you can't listen to anything or watch TV, like what do you really focus on, right? Are we becoming this such a busy world? It's like we have to be catered to, focused. But here are some things that help you pay attention to help with that distraction. So think about why you chose the food that you did. So the first thing that you can focus on what you're eating and what made you choose that food, right? So that's number one. And this is a great step to mindful eating, and also combine some practices of intuitive eating as well. So it takes those both together. So it's a way to remain neutral and not judge our choices, right? So it takes out that self-judgment, that self-reflection comes into play. But at the same time, become aware of our intentions, and we understand if we're physically or emotionally hungry, right? Like, so what was driving us there? And soon we really start to develop certain cravings for food based on those emotions that are true to what we're needing. So how does the food smell, right? So it's just an interesting one. So start using your senses by starting with smell, right? What aromas did you notice in the food? How did it change just by sitting in front of you on your plate or taking your first bite, right? Is the smell intriguing? Is it sweet smelling or tangy? Does it smell spicy because of all the garlic and peppers you used? Is smell as an interesting sense to you while mindful eating? Because unlike taste and sight, it isn't the one that you think we use as often during the meals, but it's so key. It part of that olfactory and limbic system. So did you enjoy the flavors? So as you begin eating your meals, notice each of the flavors of your food and decide if they're satisfying or not. Like, was that joyful for me? Did I love it? Was it like, oh my gosh, I don't want to eat that. Like that tasted or awful. So one thing to do during this time is to first imagine how it will taste. Like, oh my gosh, how's that delicious watermelon going to taste like in the middle of the summer? Then describe how it does taste in your journal. And finally, the best part of the flavors, is it like tangy or sweet? How did it really satisfy you? Or are you enjoying the freshness of the salad more than you thought you would? Right? You're like, oh, I thought salad was going to be kind of like, but then you're like, oh my God, it was so good. Right? So pay attention to that too. And again, a lot can come up with this very simple practice. So again, as I focused on before, when did you start experiencing fullness? So when you get further into your meal, you want to really start eating slower and paying attention to your body's signals that it's full. You're looking for signs that you might start getting full. Before, it's like, oh my God, I feel so full, I can't eat more, right? You got to unzip the pants. This can be a little different for everyone. So here are some signs to keep out for. So one, the food starts tasting different or less intriguing. Two, you start playing with food, like moving it around on the plate. Three, your stomach feels physically full or bloated. And then four, you lose interest in the food. So those are the four things to really pay attention to in your journal. And don't worry, these are all in the ebook, so you don't have to write them down now. You'll have them later. So do you feel happy and satisfied? So when your meal is over, do you do a summary about how you felt afterwards? Did you feel satisfied and happy with your food choices? You're like, oh yeah, that was great, I totally do that again. Or nah, not really. Was it satisfying for you? Would you eat it again? Would you prepare it differently next time? So make a little note of that. So, and then mindful eating helps you become mindful with your body. So mindful eating is often thought of as a way to change your eating habits and help you understand more about your food fears and anxiety, and help you to have a better relationship with food. But it can also heal your relationship with your actual physical body and actually help you to identify many physical traits you weren't even aware of. So that's really key. And so, how do you feel when you're full? Right? So what's that feeling of fullness like? So instead of just focusing on how you think about feeling full, try to use your body sensations as cues to know when you feel full. So oftentimes we are motivated more by our thoughts, worries, and fears as opposed to our actual feelings. And your body is smart, right? Our body knows a lot and will tell you everything you need to know if we know how to tune in and listen to it. So it tells us when we're hungry, what we're craving, when to stop eating as you get closer to that fullness. But if you wait for your mind to tell you, you might find sometimes you purposely eat less, right? And so eat less than our body needs to cut calories or eat well past fullness because you just aren't paying attention, right? It's easy to tune out, right? But now we're going to be really tuning in and starting to pay attention, being mindful when our body pays attention to how we feel while eating and throughout the rest of the day, right? So it's not just in that moment, but how the food affected us throughout the day. And we're going to learn like what foods don't feel the best. So another way mindful eating helps with your body's mindfulness is by understanding how different foods make us feel. So this isn't about restricting. That's not what mindfulness is about. We're not restricting our food or trying to go on a diet. That's totally not what this is about. We're simply becoming aware of the way different foods affect us. So for example, like you might find that while you absolutely love sweets, maybe you have this huge sweet tooth, they tend to cause a pretty bad energy crash for you if you have them early in the day. By being mindful, you then know to save them maybe till later in the day when you're able to crash out, or use what you learn through mindful eating to decide what meals are most appropriate for you for different times of the day, while still eating all the foods that you love and nourish your body properly. And then the last one is, are you learning your actual hunger signals, right? So we have a specific signal that our brain and gut communicate to tell us when our brain is full and to stop eating. That's ghrelin. So it's like growling, right? Our body tells us when we're full. So as you practice mindfulness more, you can start noticing your hunger signals in addition to fullness cues. So this might take a little more time, if you're used to just eating at designated times during the day, or you have an issue with emotional eating. So this is the retraining. Like I mentioned before, it takes time. Go slow, take it easy. But the more you practice mindfulness, right, the easier it is to pay attention to. So does what you eat matter, right? Of course it does, right? So let's talk about that. So, a common question that really comes up when I'm talking about eating with patients is that the journey of mindful eating is whether or not what we choose to eat is important. And as far as nutrition and health go, of course it does, right? Of course it makes a difference. But the purpose of mindful eating isn't nearly as important as understanding your own habits, listening to your emotions, listening to those food choices, and how the food makes you feel. So, mindfulness changes how you think about food. So, even if you don't realize it, you have certain judgments and preconceptions about food. It can be from how we were brought up or through our genetics or and the school that we went to, the people that we hang out with. We all have different conceptions when it comes to food or preconceptions. So maybe you think, too much sugar will cause acne and skin disorders or eating processed food is bad. These judgments can damage your relationship with food because then we have a specific emotion come up every time we eat that food, or even if coming in contact with that food. So, with mindful eating, you're no longer judging anything you eat. This is when those intuitive eating practices come into play. So the point really is not to tell yourself you shouldn't eat something, but instead to acknowledge your food choices and understand why you made them and how you feel while eating them. So really that's all there is to it. It's actually pretty simple when you break it down like that, right? So, are you really ready to take your health to the next level? Think about how amazing your skin and body could feel with even more nourishing food and healthy habits, right? Having that mindfulness come into play. So, if you're ready to love the skin that you're in and feel better than you have in years, it's time to try my proven systems. I've worked with millions of patients, and this is a great way to really start to have some of my systems come into play. And it's worked for me and countless of patients. And I know that it'll work for you too. So if you're ready to dive deeper into a clean eating program that takes your health, your life, and energy to the next level, you can join my upcoming DIY genetic detox program that's going to be starting in May. You can find more about it on my website. It'll be launching soon at www.doclulu.com. All the information is there. And you'll receive like an in-depth guide, 30 mouth-watering recipes, allergy friendly, easy to make, and step-by-step plan of action to really help you develop a better relationship with food and meals that will help your body get rid of sugars naturally. And most importantly, you get access to me to address any questions or concerns or struggles you have along the way. Make sure you're following me on Instagram at Dr. LuLu Shimmick to learn more about health tips, recipes, free webinars, programs, and more. So thank you so much for attending, everyone, this evening. It's been a pleasure to talk to you about mindful eating, and I hope that you thoroughly enjoyed this webinar.